Hey, thanks very much for coming. When I saw the really nice weather today, I said, what would I rather be doing? And I'd rather be planting dahlias. And I thought if I had a choice about being here, I would be in my back garden planting dahlias. So thanks for not doing that, Stephen. Welcome back. I don't know if you've ever been in this room before or not, but the room was originally designed. This is the story I was told. That doesn't mean it's true. But it was told to me by a reasonably reliable person that this used to be a flat room and they carved the floor out and there used to be chairs around the outside here. Some of you might remember that. And the idea was that in the old universities, people think it's a new idea that older faculty don't do anything in universities. That's an ancient idea. It's not a new idea. We've always done that for 1,000 years. But the idea was that the old faculty would sit around the edges and the young faculty would preach down here to the kids of the rich and famous. Some things have changed and some things have not. But the chairs were taken away for health and safety reasons in case some older faculty member fell over the edge and died as a result of their injuries or so on. But I think you'd agree it's still a very beautiful room. This is a nice number of people here. You don't have to sit beside anybody you don't want to sit beside, which is a big attraction. I joined UCD. Some of you will be shocked to hear this in 1996. No, thank you. That's beyond kind. Thank you very much. But you'll be even more shocked to hear that our panelists today also came in 1995 and 1996. In fact, all four of us, apart from Catherine, were all here at the same time. I was the teacher then. They were the students. I don't know if any of you read, there's a really nice book by Vikram Seth. It's called A Suitable Boy. I think there was a movie made. You might have seen the movie. So I don't remember the movie, but I remember the book. It's a really nice book. And in the book, the young teacher says to the old teacher, the students don't appreciate me. So they're only the kind of thing that a young teacher would say, right? And the old teacher says, really, 90% of all students forget who you are as soon as they leave the classroom, if they ever knew who you were in the first place. So forgotten is the normal thing. He said, most likely, if they remember you, they remember you because you committed some crime against them. So we were just talking about, in Mary's class, we had a friend, well, I won't say his name just in case he's in the room and maybe his hair's fallen out and we don't recognize him, but he looked like a movie star. That's not a compliment in this case. And I think for his birthday, there was a stripogram or a kissogram. And in the same class, in those days, we're in the big lecture theatre in Belfield, and sometimes somebody would bring a dog in, like an old stray dog that had the mange or something like that, and they'd kick it down the steps. I know it's horrific, isn't it? But in those days, we were a nation of dog lovers, and that was in Mary's class. Now, Mary was not involved in it, but this guy was involved in it. So sometimes you commit a crime and students resent you for the crime. But the best you can hope for from former students is that they forgive you for the crimes you committed against them. And that's what I always hope for. When I got past a certain point, I would previously have taken pride in the achievements of these four people. I did kind of teach Catherine a little bit. I kind of think we had that teacher-student relationship, but now I know it's nothing to do with me and the excellence that many of you who are former students, nothing to do with me. I was just lucky to be in the same room with you as you passed through, and I'm very grateful for that. Mary remembered who I was. Tiernan remembered who I was. Fergal never saw me before yesterday. No idea who I am. I did check his exam results. He did really very well. But anyway, we're tremendously honoured to have our four guests here. I'm joined by Catherine Keogh, first of all. I'm going to say something that Catherine asked me not to say, but because we're in community here, I don't mind saying it. I think Catherine is the best business-to-business marketer in the whole world. I say that. That was a trumpet roar in agreement, which I arranged with our friends at the back. I say that without any hesitation. I've never met anybody. I met a woman once who was a head of marketing for GE. I thought she was kind of in the same field, but I never met anybody for whom in business-to-business markets is able to use marketing to make a difference to volume of sales and profitability. Full stop. So, without hesitation, I hope you don't mind me saying that. MBA graduate from here. She won't tell us what year, but it was a little while ago.
It was after 96.
It was after 96.
For the record.
And she came first in her class, got the Charles Harvey Prize. And worked for Altec. We know each other from Altec for 25 years. So if you know Altec, she was part of the team that built Altec from, about 10 or 20 million to the company it is today, which is about 3.5. And now she's head of corporate affairs at Kerry, which is my favourite company in the whole world. Mary Quaney, is that how you pronounce your second? Yeah. Was a brilliant undergraduate student of mine, totally memorable. And that's why she got first class honours. Went to work for PwC, was terrific there. And then I want to say the nicest thing about you is she worked with Eddie O'Connor. And I think when we think about UCD legends, I'm a Liverpool fan, so we talk about club legends all the time. Like, is Mo Salah a legend? Yeah, he probably is. Like, is Andy Robertson a legend? Yeah, he probably is. But legends of UCD, Eddie O'Connor, there's no probably about he's a legend of UCD. Mary worked with him. Maybe you'll tell us a little bit. If we have time, maybe we talk a little bit about that when we get towards the end, Mary. And then was CEO of a renewable energy company. And I can't believe that I haven't met her before, because we had a very interesting open-ended conversation last week that could have gone on for much longer. Now, are we allowed to say who you work for now?
Yes.
Yeah, she works for a company called Cofra as a non-executive director. And we might get you to talk a little bit about that as well, if you don't mind. Because I think it's super interesting family business, and what they do and how she approaches it, I think is very interesting for us to listen to. Thanks for being here, Mary. Fergalimi, B&L. Went to Harvard Business School, did ALP, which is a fairly elite program. Not fairly elite, like it's really elite program. I first came across him, and he was head of the Green Core business in North America. And this young guy was running that. I thought it was a brilliant idea. I still think it's a brilliant idea. If we have time, we might talk about it. We probably won't, but we might, because I still think the problems that he solved for Starbucks is still a problem that Starbucks has today, in my opinion. And he resolved that issue. But I think probably we know him best as CEO of Quilcha. And I'm a public servant, I always have been. I worked in DCU before I came here, I never had a real job. So I really appreciate what the public service means. Lots of bad things about it, right? But the good sides are so much better than we ever appreciate. And it shouldn't be appreciated, it should be pushed hard. But Fergal ran Quilcha, which I think is one of those jewels in the crown in the semi-state body. And I think he turned it into that jewel. He certainly polished it very hard in terms of driving profitability and reducing headcount. Not in an Elon Musk kind of way, I hasten to add, but in a proper kind of way. You can always reduce headcount in the public service, and I think he did a super job there. But he has no memory of me in class. And I think that is entirely normal. So I'm not holding it against him, only a little bit. Because in those days I could actually teach. But maybe there wasn't any dogs in the class, or I was in the class once and they hosed down the room with the fire hose. I know any of you in that class? It's hard to admit it now, but yes, that is a true story. And Tiernan, I'll tell you the shocking thing about Tiernan is that Tiernan was also here in 1996, which is 30 years ago. And I still think of him as a very young person, because I knew him very well when he was here. He's a super, super young guy. And that's how I still think about him. And when I looked up him on LinkedIn, I said, I wonder what year Tiernan was here, because it doesn't seem like that long ago. And I thought, holy shit, it's 30 years. And we're joined today by one of his classmates, Conor Heavey, at the back of the room, who's a colleague of ours here. And if I have time at the end, Conor, I will tell the Conor Heavey story. And Tiernan has validated that story, just because you always say I make it up. It's not quite as good as the dog in the bag or the stripogram, but it's kind of along the same lines, in the sense that it did involve various stages of nudity. Will we welcome our panel and thank them for being here? That's that. I'm not if I was a normal academic, this session would be about AI. But I stopped being a normal academic about like 20 years ago. I kind of got, this is being recorded, so I don't want to say I got bored of being an academic, but I got bored of talking to my own academic community. Not because people aren't interesting, they're fabulously interesting and they're super smart, but it just became a little bit incestuous. And I met a colleague, a friend at the Wharton School, and he said, you know, what you should do is you should talk to more alumni. And I said, like, what would I ask them? He said, why don't you just ask them, go and ask them what's on their mind. What are they doing at the moment? And that's what I started doing. And 20-something years later, I probably write 12 or 14 case studies per year. And I would say, without too much of an exaggeration, I spend 150 days a year in companies. And very often it's just talking about what's on your mind. And for that reason, I'm kind of very interested in AI, but I'm more interested in growth. And because I think that's what's in the mind of companies right now. I've had 2 CEOs recently who both went on these tours, actually 3 CEOs, but one of them is really smart, so this didn't happen to him, but 2 who went on tours to Silicon Valley and came back and said, we want to change everything, we want our whole company to be about AI. In one case I said to him, I said, but there is no application of AI in your business. He said, I don't care, I want everybody using AI. And I said, well, like what? He said, well, I want everybody to use Claude. And I said, but you paid for Copilot. He said, I don't care, I want everybody to use Claude, with no logic or reason to it whatsoever. And I said, you're going to do your numbers this year? He said, I don't care, we have to transfer to AI. So I'm interested in growth. I think that's what companies are really interested in. That's what I write case studies about. I've written 2 case studies, I'm in the process of writing 2 case studies. But interesting enough, both on French companies. One is a French cheese company, turnover is about 4 billion. And they're expanding into North Africa, for Africa, heavily in America and heavily in China. The most fantastic, sustainable, healthy living principles underlining their strategy. And when you talk to the CEO about AI, she wants to talk about AI, but she really wants to talk about how does she get 20% growth this year in a business that's 4 billion turnover. That's pretty good, right? The other company is both privately owned businesses, both fantastically productive, both from France, just to say that one more time. The other company is an animal health company, and what they're trying to do, what the CEO is not interested in growth per se, he's interested in increasing the valuation of his business through growth. So he's not interested in growth. He wants his business next year to be more valuable than it is this year. Not to sell it, just because for the families he works for, that's what they want. And that's what he's driving towards. And so I could go on and on with these companies that I've had the good fortune to interact with. But it's the lessons from those guys that I want to try and draw on today. I spoke, you know, I think the CEO of every major consumer goods firm, and apart from Tesco, every major retailer in the UK and most of them in Europe have lost their jobs in the last 2 years. That is an exaggeration without checking too hard, but I think it's kind of true. And I asked one of our alums, an MBA alum, I said, what's going on? And he said, oh, it's really simple. All these firms have allowed their costs to get out of control. Post-COVID, you could charge anything you wanted, everybody made a ton of money, and they thought that would continue forever, so they just kept putting prices up. And now their costs are out of control. The second thing that they have done is because they have allowed their costs to get out of control, it has impacted on their speed and agility. And so they can't do stuff anymore. And the third thing is that they have forgotten that what innovation is about, it's not about putting a different wrapper on an old product or selling it 2 for 1. That's not what it's about. It's about creating new platforms for growth and using those platforms to generate growth. And that's what I wanted to talk about when the Dean asked me to talk today. I said, that's what I'm talking about. And I'm so delighted that so many of you turned up and our panelists agreed to join. So let me just, somebody told me I had to show a few slides. So I'm not great at slides, but I'll show you these few slides. I don't know if any of you are old enough to remember 9/11. I was stuck in Oslo. It was a horrible time. We thought the world was going to end. Literally, I went back to my hotel. Liverpool were playing Bayern Munich in the Champions League, but they weren't showing the Champions League. If the match was played, they weren't showing the Champions League. They were showing, obviously, the horror and tragedy. I thought I'd never get home. And when I got on the plane to go home, I was supposed to go through London. They just had a plane going from Oslo to Dublin. Do you want to be on this plane? Yeah, but I have a business class ticket with British Airways. No, this is the plane going to Dublin. You either stay in Oslo until some other time you get. So you got on the plane was absolutely silent because we were all sure we were going to die. Do you remember what that was like? It was kind of the first time in 20 years since the Americans beat the Soviets, which is probably after the Afghan war. First time in 20 years we had to worry about what was going on in the environment. And if you think about the chaos that we've lived through since then, I think we should think about it in that kind of 30-year arc. The chaos of international terrorism after 9/11, the following chaos of the global financial crisis. Do you remember Michael Murphy and I were here? We ran some great programs for Borbia because we thought the country was going to close down. Any of you had any money? If you were an academic, maybe you weren't an academic, maybe you had some money. Trying to get your money out of the country because we thought the banks were gone. And of course they were, but they were somewhat bailed out. And now we can't have a few people go on an overpriced cruise on a ship. I don't know how much that cruise was. I bet you it's about 70,000 a head, right? See the size of the ship? I'd say it was 70 grand a head. They all got some disease from rats somewhere, and we think the world is about to end. That is the whiplash effect of COVID on all of us. We are still terrified that we're all going to die of some disease. And that, or worse, that we'd be locked in our house and we wouldn't be able to go to the pub. But this is a whiplash effect of this. And of course then we have what somebody's politely put on here as the geopolitical fracture. The thing about the geopolitical fracture, to my mind, is I had a friend at Yale University who called me, a really fine scholar. She called me when President Trump was elected the first time, and she said, Damien, I want to apologize for the election of President Trump. And I said, why would you do that? He was democratically elected. And she says, yeah, but he's not a very good person. And he said, actually, I don't know anybody who voted for him. And I said to her, I don't know anybody who didn't vote for him. And in the last election, she phoned me again. She says, I can't believe it. And I said, I still don't know anybody who didn't vote for him. In America, there is this in-held belief that the system needs to change. They really believe that to be true. They want to know why we have 6 or 8 weeks holidays. I mean, it's a bit longer if you're an academic, right? Why we have the fabulous pensions that we have, and it's a bit better if you're an academic as well, right? Full disclosure, while maternity leave there is 4 weeks and 2 weeks holidays, and they're sending their kids all around the world to fight wars that we all benefit from. Now, we can argue the hell out of that one after the session, right? But that's how Americans think about this. So why this geopolitical fracture, to my mind, is so important is it's not like we just had a bit of a disagreement with the Chinese. There's a whole community, the most powerful country in the world in particular, who's decided this is how it's going to be, and this is how we fix our problems. So when we think about this geopolitical fracture, it's kind of like, let's all get together in New York and we'll have a discussion and try and fix it. Forget about it, baby. This is the next 20 years, or I don't know, 30 years, and it doesn't matter who gets elected, it doesn't matter what happens in November, this is continuing. So I think this burning kind of platform it's pretty exciting, right? One of the business schools I work in America, they're meeting on a monthly basis to work out how to make money out of this. They're not rubbing their hands saying, oh Jesus, what are we going to do? How do we make money out of the opportunities that arise from here? I write case studies with some friends from Harvard Business School. These are two cases I wrote in the last little while. One is about building resiliency in the supply chain of McDonald's. McDonald's is the most sustainable company in the world in the food industry. The other most sustainable company is a company called Walmart. You might know. These companies have been committed to sustainability long before you ever heard that word. Even if you're a member of Antoshka or Greenpeace or the World Wildlife Fund, McDonald's has been committed to sustainability for 50 years. What they've always been able to do is to solve the problems of their business within their own supply chain. So they just call up Keypack or Dawn Meats. I'm a director at Keypack, and they call us up and they say, hey, we've got a bit of an issue, can you fix that? Yeah, sure. Today, the complexity of their supply chain, the complexities that are introduced as a result of the previous 3 things, what that means is that they cannot resolve their problems in the context of the supply chain that they operate in. So what they're looking at is, how do we get our supply chain to be more effective by working with other actors in the food industry supply chain? And the complexity is like, oh, it's scary. When I looked at this area of resiliency, when I was writing this case, I looked at the 4 or 5 industries where I thought resiliency would be high. What would you think would be the most resilient industry in the world?
Agriculture?
Agriculture, yeah. Agriculture is resilient because of the heroism of farmers. We keep asking them to do more, but they are heroes of our society. I thought defense would be. I really thought, you've got to have enough bullets and guns to defend yourself. And I spoke to some former students from the US military and said, tell us how you manage resiliency. They laughed. They said, we don't have any resiliency. You're seeing this now in Iran. They don't have enough missiles to do what they want to do, which I'm neither for nor against. They don't have enough bullets. They don't have enough ships. The Brits don't have enough ships. There's no resiliency in the defense supply chain. We saw there's no resiliency in the pharma supply chain. There's no resiliency in the aerospace supply chain. So this resiliency that we're talking about here, it's actually really hard. It's really hard to get. McDonald's are trying to work this one out. I wrote a case last year in a company that we all in this room know. It's called Fifes. Ashley, do you know any Fifes advertising? What is their famous quote? For a prize. There is a prize for this.
No idea. Bananas like these don't grow on trees.
Bananas like these don't grow.
5 times better than the average banana. That's the one. It's a super banana. You know what the problem with banana? I have a prize at the front for you. Coming at the end. It's a real prize, not makey-uppy, right? The problem with bananas is, you know where bananas are grown? Let's not pick out any country, because Belize is a great country. Belize is the only country in the world that's entirely food self-sufficient. And it's going to be the next Dubai. Belize is a super country. But basically bananas are grown the same place they grow cocaine. And so the banana industry, this is not a Fifes problem. Banana industry is real. Stephen, big problem with cocaine in the same containers, right? Stephen works for Dole. But the big problem is it's grown in countries where they don't really have governments anymore. They have like gangsters who kind of run the place. We could pick out a few countries and we might get it wrong as to where that is. But you get the picture. So where banana production for companies like Fifes is being moved to is places like Costa Rica, where government stability is much higher. They don't have an army. They spend their 2% that they spend on their military. They hand themselves over to the Americans, and they spend the 2%. If you've been to Costa Rica on your holidays, it's a wonderful place. Everybody speaks English and everybody can read and write. It's like being in Ireland in the 1970s. Everybody knows what to do. And they have all the factories that they stole off us that we had in the 1970s. But Fifes is moving because they can't reliably grow bananas in the places in the banana belt where they historically did. Cocoa production is being moved from the various places in Africa. Don't need to be negative about countries, particularly in Africa. It's being moved from, they can't say certain things now are chocolate because they don't have enough cocoa in them. The reason is they can't get enough cocoa, so they're moving cocoa production to Brazil, which is a proper country with proper. They lock up politicians there as well. I always think that's a good sign when they lock up politicians. We've done a bit of that here, right? So I think this is real serious stuff in terms of the resiliency of supply chain and the impact of geopolitics. So these are the 3 levers of resilient growth, according to somebody from our MBA program 30 years ago, CEO of a big company in the US today. So one is cost takeout. Our friend, I won't name him because I didn't ask his permission, but what he says is you have to be constantly taking cost out. And when he comes here and talks to CEOs that we invite to dinner and stuff like that, he said, what is your productivity gain for this year? And suddenly everybody's examining their shoes because they don't think about it. They don't think about how much they save. And he's a big fan of sustainability. So, well, if you're not taking cost out, how can you invest in sustainability? He's a big fan of AI. If you're not taking cost out, how can you invest in AI? So cost takeout is absolutely central to it. Speed and agility of execution. I mean, it's such an easy thing to say, isn't it? Speed and agility of execution. Do any of you think that you're not agile? Does anybody think they're not agile? Do any of you think you're not speedy? I mean, you don't. You can put your hand up if you want, but this is a big unmeasurable for us. But I think the third one is the most important thing, and it's why I particularly wanted our friends to be here today. I wrote a case on Zoetis, which is an animal health company. I don't know if you ever heard of it. Have any of you ever heard of it? Any of you, do you work for them? No? Have any of you got dogs that you like? Have you got a dog that you like? Yeah? So if you like a dog, you might be given it a drug called Apoquil. It's like for dogs that have, it's doggy dermatitis. Did you know dogs can have dermatitis? When I was a kid, we just called it the mange. And well, you did nothing about it, right? Sometimes you rub muck on their back and the stitch kind of went away. And sometimes the dog's hair fell out. You know, the dog died eventually, but, you know. What Zoetis recognised, they previously were the animal health division of Pfizer. And they were split out because Pfizer didn't want to have an animal health business anymore because it wasn't growing fast enough. And they split the business out. The way they split it was kind of awkward because they wanted to take a big tax benefit for Pfizer as a result of the split. So it was a financial transaction, not a strategic transaction. And then what they realized was, hey, you know what? Nobody's spending any money on animal production, like farm animal production, but people really care about their pets. Why don't we sell them something for their pets? And their first blockbuster product was Apoquil. Their second blockbuster product, any of you have a cat, don't put your hand up because I think people who have cats are evil. So cats are evil creatures, so to own one, right? But cats cannot express pain, apparently. Did you know that? If a dog has pain, it goes, ow, 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 ow. Cats don't go meow, meow, meow when they have pain. They just kind of go like, ugh. So cats have pain, and so what they invented was a long-term pain relief for cats that have arthritis, which is obviously a painful condition for cats. They did it in about, 4 years, spent 7% of their sales on R&D, and today the company value is maybe 10 or 15 times what it was when they split. They created a new growth platform, and today they build blockbuster drugs on the back of it, and they own the companion animal category. That's what I mean about creating new growth platforms. I want to have this speed and agility thing, and this is the last slide here. I think I hate showing slides. This is the Wall Street Journal this week. I thought this was the coolest thing ever. I love the Ford Motor Company, and I love Ford cars. I love one of those Ford Tundra trucks, but my wife won't allow me to get one. But this is a team in Ford, which is the only American car company not to take a bailout during the Obama bailout. And what they're trying to do is they're having their asses kicked by the Chinese EV industry. So what they're trying to do is to work out how do we beat them at their own game. So when the factory is closed, off shift from midnight to 8 a.m., they're experimenting with how they reorganize their manufacturing process in order to compete with Chinese manufacturers, and how they can also produce an EV truck for $30,000. I'll talk about Burmalt maybe at the end. So here's what I want to think about. Here's our central kind of question, and it's this. I want to think about, kind of firm, simultaneously cut costs, move faster, and also building something new. Or do these things trade off each other in the sense that it actually doesn't work out in real life? And we're going to do that through two mechanisms. One is I'm going to ask each of our friends, I'm going to start with Mary, because she was the first one on the panel I spoke to. I'm going to ask them for one thing that's on their mind, and then I'm going to ask for some stories from their experiences. I'm going to ask you about what's one thing on your mind as well. It might be interesting if anybody wants to join in. And then let's try and reach a conclusion on this. So, Mary, thanks again for being here. I think your microphone is working. I think you had some very interesting things to say. I'm not going to hold you to what we talked about last week. If you want to say something different now, feel free. But I think you had very interesting comments to make about energy. But talk about whatever you want.
Okay. Thank you for having me here, Damien, and lovely to see so many faces and a few familiar faces in the audience. So I have two things on my mind, but I'll talk about one. The two things on my mind that are preoccupying a lot of my headspace right now. One is AI, but the other topic is energy, and maybe I'll just explain a little bit why. I've been in the renewable energy world for the past 16 years, and I'm now in a board role of a family office, as you mentioned, that has like a private equity business, real estate business, some retail and some other investments. So I sit across many different, like a couple of different investment committees, and also the main board. And time again, I see forecasts on the impact of the war in Iran, and particularly in terms of the European context, and all forecasts that I have seen there and elsewhere are focused on how long the Strait of Hormuz will be closed, and is this, a matter of weeks, a matter of months, and then the kind of economic predictions are based on a number of different scenarios, best case, moderate case, worst case, but the worst case is maybe like a 9-month type of impact. But what I've been challenging and quite preoccupied with is just the fragility of the overall energy world in which we operate, particularly in a European context. And if you bear with me, I'll just take a step back. Before there was ever any, Truth Social feed about Iran or the Straits of Hormuz, Europe is already in a very fragile place in terms of its overall energy security. Going right back to 2011, when there was the Fukushima disaster in Japan, and Germany decided to close its European, or close its nuclear fleet, which is about a third of its energy or electricity needs back then. Then we've had, obviously, Russia invading Ukraine in 2022, and again, the forecasts then were very similar to what I see now in terms of forecasted impact. This was all expected to be, a short-term blip, 6 months, 9 months, take your pick in terms of the length of the war. But it woke up Europe to the very real reality that Europe had been dependent on a flow of relatively cheap Russian gas for decades that was effectively subsidizing Europeans' industrial base. That was exacerbated when Germany shut down its nuclear plant. So why am I bringing up all of this now? My point is that since 2022, Europe has had to decrease that dependency on Russia very dramatically, and it's been, to a large extent, replaced by imported LNG, which comes from Asia, and hence the fragility of Europe even predating the war in Iran. We came out of the winter with historically low storage supply of gas in Europe at about 30% of where it should be. It was quite a cold winter. And the other elements of the energy mix within Europe are all also quite fragile, or certainly at risk. For example, in 2022, if we hadn't have had the invasion of Russia into Ukraine, all the headlines across Europe, I believe, from an energy perspective, would have been about the stress and underproduction of France's nuclear fleet, which again is a very significant backbone of the overall energy mix. Nuclear, as we know, is a very solid level of baseload power. In 2022, there was a large amount of plant that was undergoing maintenance, some planned, some not planned, but also extremely high temperatures during the summer months. Nuclear requires cooling, it requires access to low temperatures of water, particularly in the south of France, where that comes from a large amount of plant that's co-located in rivers. And when river temperatures reach a certain level, then the cooling effect obviously is no longer there, and production has to decrease. We're also coming out of a winter where Norway, again, Norway's hydro base is a very significant, you could think of it as a battery in terms of a consistent supply that, again, can be flexed based on its reservoir levels to supply electricity into mainland Europe and into the UK. Coming out of the winter in Norway, it's been a very cold winter, but a very dry winter, so its snow levels and the levels of water building up in the reservoir from that snow melt are at a once in a generational level of very low levels. So my whole point is that the stability of Europe's energy mix and the cost, therefore, in terms of its energy supply, because when you don't have nuclear producing at optimal levels, when you don't have renewables producing at optimal levels, when you don't have hydro coming from Norway at predictable levels or at the planned levels, then the energy is coming more from gas, from LNG, and the cost of electricity to the consumer is based on the highest cost of electricity going into the mix. We're at historically high levels in terms of the cost of electricity across Europe, and I can see that as almost a permanent effect within the overall energy mix. There's a risk in terms of energy security, cost, and also the stability of supply and how all of these various factors interplay. So what does all of this mean? I believe in terms of, decision makers, the macroeconomic picture, I think is at a significant risk of being worse than what is being forecast in terms of potential for is becoming more the kind of dominant theme now, an expectation of interest rate rises, a real prospect of stagflation across some of the European markets. And the fragility and competitiveness clearly across Europe, and then when you couple on, of course, all the geopolitical interplays, etc., I think many of these forces are perhaps being underestimated. So that's one of the main themes. A long-winded answer to a simple.
Put your hand up if you're glad question. You came today. That's scary stuff, Mary, isn't it?
Well,
I haven't read anything about that.
Well, I think one of the issues is that there are many different forecasts that are predicting the impact of one factor, namely the Straits of Hormuz. It's preoccupying many of the energy forecasts. But I suppose my point is there are many not insignificant risks within the overall energy mix that also have vulnerabilities. And I'm not saying that all of this will necessarily play out in terms of the worst case, hopefully not. But if I put myself back to 30 years ago when I sat in these lecture halls, and up until recent times, we talked about black swan events as being these kind of, never seen, and if you ever saw one, you were unlucky. But in the last number of years, when Russia invaded Ukraine and the whole breakdown in energy markets, being as a pure play renewable energy company at the time, it had a massively detrimental impact on our overall business. I see one or two former colleagues in the audience who've lived through this. And again, it was like a whole host of black swan events that, of course, all occurred at the same time, coupled with coming out of the COVID pandemic, vulnerability within supply chain, a relatively immature sector. COVID was a black swan event. Russia invading Ukraine was a black swan. I could tell you I've no more black swans now than I know white swans. And the interplay of many different risk factors I now believe to be much more significant than, or the risk of that interplay is much more significant than what one might have forecast. Or certainly when I read a lot of these forecasts that talk about best case, worst case, moderate case, it really gives me cause for alarm. And I think that there are a lot more risks beneath the surface.
A lot of us are seeing company documents, and the CFO presents, best case scenario, worst case scenario, likely scenario. And what you're telling our friends in the room today is maybe want to go and look again. First of all, at the best and worst, because it's probably going to be wider than you think. And then also the duration, the idea that it's going to be over by Christmas, as they famously say, that's not going to happen either.
I don't believe so, and I think those. Yeah, I think I would really challenge the best case, worst case, moderate case type of forecast, because I think the
What's
depth
a better way of doing it?
Well, I mean, I think ultimately then it always comes back to, and where I tried to take the conversation back to as well, what does all of this mean for me? If this played out for 4 years, would you look back and go, I made the wrong decisions then? And I think it's trying to get yourself into that mindset of that greater depth of perspective, and then what does it mean? What does it mean for this business, for this opportunity, for this investment decision, for strategy? That's where I would bring it back to pretty quickly. Is
what kind of capability do you need to have to do that? So there's some people here from huge companies. They have a team of graduates from the Smurfit School, accountants to do all that stuff for them. And then they apply their wisdom of judgment to it, right? But if you're a medium-sized company, do nicely, down in, whatever, I'm not going to pick out anybody in the room. Nice business, profitable, well-managed, family business maybe, but with some professional managers. How do you do what you just said?
I think, it's a difficult thing to do, but in terms of, you've got 1,000 things on your agenda and all that needs to be done this week and next month, and all the pressures. But I really think you have to take yourself out of that environment, either through, like you said at the outset, if you're in a world of academia and you're just, if you go and meet alumni and you ask them those questions, what's on your mind? A similar type of analogy, you have to really, I think, remove yourself from the day-to-day setting and try to get a perspective that's outside of your own ecosystem and outside of your industry as well, I think, in terms of, what the bigger picture is.
Yeah, I always think when you come to things like this, if you met one person and you learned one thing, that's enough. It's one afternoon, a couple of hours, you got a free lunch. Do you have to pay to come? Did you have to pay? I say it's free. It's a free lunch. Parking is free. You're not even going to get clamped. Come on. I just think, why don't you go home and think about your business for an hour? That's kind of what I'm trivializing a little bit, but I think if you, so more and more of these things I go to, and more people listen to, actually, if you could spare the time just to think about your business for a little while, maybe every week, it makes such a difference, wouldn't it? I met the CEO of Nestle once, I wrote a case study on the CEO of Nestle, and we were supposed to meet him for half an hour, as a royal visit, And he's such a nice man. We were with him for nearly the whole day. But he took out of his pocket at one point, like a printout from, like your calendar from your Outlook, and there was nothing on it apart from our meeting. And I said to Mr. Buka, I said, your calendar's not very busy. And he says, it's terribly busy. And I said, well, what do you? He said, I'm thinking about the future of food. We had nothing in his diary. It was a Thursday. He had nothing in his diary. And it was deliberately like that because he wanted to just think about the future. I mean, the biggest $125 billion turnover. He had other people to worry about the modelling of fuel. I'm sure he was thinking the fuel was not an issue at the time. It was something else. But Tiernan, I'm hoping you'll have more bad news for us on AI because I want to drive this message home of, guys, it's time to think a little bit about this. But I should have said you're head of digital transformation for Diageo for Europe.
Yeah,
I got that title right.
Yeah. So, just listening there, I think the future growth and what I'm advocating for, it's around adaptability. So, one thing we heard today, whether it's from Ambassador O'Malley right through to just what we heard there, right? The world is even getting more. The VUCA is increasing, if you like, more volatile and harder than before. So, the companies that will win are a bit like your slide, as the ones that can do it faster and quicker and be more agile than before. Now that sounds, as you said, very, very easy, very simple. It's what we learned here 30 years ago, right? And it's still the same today as it was then.
We're still charging 25 grand a year for it here today.
Yeah, geez, that's good. But in my line, where my little field, it's around, well then, how can you use AI, data and technology to adapt and help people navigate that change quicker so you can respond quicker, you can be closer to your customers, you can know what's going on with your consumers faster than you did in the past. So that's where we're trying to concentrate on. So whether it's, the way I would put it is, when we used to hire people, and then any organization used to hire people, and then they would have to look over 8 different systems to find the data, right? You'd have to have this SAP short code, like press F12 to get to this screen, and we're still training people to do that today, right? But in the future, very near future, with AI sitting above this data sets, disparate data sets, both structured and unstructured, almost the next best action or the recommendation is surfaced to you. So then you can then make a decision based on either what you see or perhaps you didn't see, and a blind spot that you didn't see. And so that's, I think, that where it's companies that embrace that different process, and that fundamentally changes the process of how value is brought and given in an organization. Those that do that first move away from just having AI as something that edits your emails and, that basic use case, to being a thought partner, a strategic analyst, helping you navigate the increasing complexity in the boardroom or even in your life at all. That's where I think the value is going to come from in an increasing fast-paced world where everything's changing almost daily. Like, I wouldn't know even how you'd start on that energy crisis in all different sectors in the world at the same time, but you could probably set up a model in time that could measure some of those impacts and start bringing some sense to the senseless.
I'm sure there's traders who are trying to do it, right?
Yeah,
to make a few quid on the...
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you can...
The problem, I tried to write a tender about 18 months ago, and I tried to use an AI tool to do it, and I worked on it for a month to try, because I'm going to put a month into teaching myself how to do this, and after a month I just gave up because it couldn't do what I wanted. So now I've started with Claude. I've gone to the classes, we've had our sessions here, and it's organising my emails and telling me what my priorities for the day are, and I don't know what they are, but it's very helpful. I mean, it's all great fun, but I'm able to get McKinsey-style reports without having to pay... McKinsey, sorry, Fergal. But,
I left 25 years ago.
There you go. But what you're talking about, I know Unilever, one of your former employers, is some way along that road.
Yeah.
I know JP Morgan are some way along that road. I mean, you can kind of pick out the firms that are because it's really difficult to do what you're saying. How do you get to that point where decision-making quality is better?
Yeah, well, look, again, it's all centered around humans at the center, right? So, again, I really don't think AI is going to take away that human judgment, because you do have to sense check it. As you said, you can get a lot of crap back, right? And you have to have a sense of what's the crap and what's the good stuff. Where we are as a company at the moment, so I have a relatively small team of 9 in my transformation team, but then we have around 35 ambassadors across the company, and their role is to take AI into their meetings and be increasingly the voice in the room when there's a topic discussed at the end of the session. Now, could we solve this problem with AI? Or how would we approach this with an AI topic? So it's just someone in the room going, is there another way to do this? And then by having that discussion, you're almost re-examining every process that you have to go, well, is there another way to find the value in this quicker, faster? You have to be patient. I mean, 9 times out of 10, the answer isn't great, and you have to keep prompting. But also what we do is with leadership teams across the company, my team would sit with them and we do a workshop where we either war game or we listen, what's the biggest thing you've got on as a team at the moment? And they'll say X, Y, or Z. And then the team will literally handhold and show them how AI could help them in their daily life, either collectively, set up an agent so that they can work across as a team, or individually how they can act as your thought partner. The simple prompt that I use almost every day is help me prepare for this, or help me prepare for that, act as my thought partner, my strategic advisor, my board level advisor, and then challenge me. Find the blind spots in the presentation I've written. And that I find helps just to coach people on to the next level of AI usage. And so it's been quite successful for us. Like, as a company, we were a pilot within Diageo doing that. We have 85% of our people in Ireland use AI on a daily basis. So it's driving that culture across the organization, but moving it away from just my email, my diary, to the next level.
I don't know if any of you have tried to use these tools in the way that Tiernan has. I have. I found them very useful. But I had a meeting 2 weeks ago, and I kind of put the details of the meeting in. I said, it was a new meeting, kind of thing I hadn't done before. So this is what I want. This is going to be who's going to be at the meeting. Give me a profile of the company. What do you think they'll want to know? What do you think I'll want to, what should I say? It was very useful, but it took me about 2 days. And I've never prepared for 2 days for a meeting in my whole damn life. And as a result now, you know what I mean? It's like, do they actually need to spend 2 days? Yeah, I'm not being flippant. I'm just like, I always thought people who were able to use a file of facts effectively. Remember file of faxes? People who could use file of facts effectively were already so organized they didn't need a file of facts, right? And this is, like, how does anybody in this room get beyond that point?
You set up an agent so that it gives it to you every time. You just go, I'm meeting John, Joe, Fred, and Thomas, and you just give it the details, and then it does all. You prompt it once.
These tech guys have all the answers, don't they?
Oh yeah.
Catherine.
I'm sure there's some in the audience who are already in that.
We'll find out.
level.
We'll find out.
Yes, Damien. What keeps you awake at night?
Well, I mean, listen.
More now.
Yeah, more now. Yeah, I know. I was like, why are you not using these tools to organize your life?
Yeah.
Have you really modeled the energy? I mean, energy. Actually, I know you have because.
Yeah. So in terms of AI.
No.
Just okay.
Yeah. What's going on?
All right. So the thing.
As the best business marketer in the world.
Thank you. Yeah. No pressure whatsoever. So look, just maybe reframe the Kerry of today, because we have continuously reinvented ourselves over the years, not least in the last 8 years. We did massive portfolio transformation. So now we are a pure play B2B flavor, taste and nutrition solutions provider. So what that means is we work with all the major food service brands in the world, with all the major food and beverage brands in the world, with all the great brands in the world. And what we do is we help make those products tastier, more nutritious. We improve the sustainability credentials, and we try to do that at a rate that's affordable for consumers. And last year we reached about 1.46, we have to report on that annually, about 1.46 billion people with what we call these sustainable nutrition solutions. So what keeps me awake at night is, what are those 1.46 billion people thinking about? Where are they going? How do we make sure our customers are in a good position to position themselves to create value for those consumers? And I think all of us know here, in terms of consumers, we are the and consumer, we call it in Kerry today, where you want products that taste great, that have the right provenance, that make you can feel good about, that are sustainable, that are maybe even produced locally, that have clean label, etc., so and so that has always been the case, and that's always been the Kerry business model, if you like, because we think consumer first. What has changed is the fact that they're all there's a confluence of consumer changes and changes in consumer preference, and that's all happening at once. And in addition to that, there are all those interplay of externalities and external factors, whether that's, the MAHA movement, whether that's, prices, and, as a result of...
MAHA's good for you though, right?
MAHA is good for us, yes,
yeah.
For Kerry Group, because basically the MAHA Make America Healthy Again movement is about reducing salt, sugar and fat, and making sure that consumers have products that are nutritionally sound, that have less of the sort of artificial ingredients. 90% of our raw materials are from nature. We're from food for food. In no small part due to our heritage. Down the southwest of Ireland, it's sort of in our DNA. But yeah, so we have that happening. There are a lot of other regulatory changes happening globally. Say where 15 years ago, I think it was maybe the traffic light system in the UK, Nutri-Score across Europe, and now front of pack labelling is mainstream. So you can go into pretty much any country in Latin America, for example, and you see a big black box if that product is not deemed healthy. Same's happening in Canada. Now they're talking about doing something similar in North America. So there are just so many moving parts at the moment. So what we are continuously striving to understand, and our founder Dennis Brosnan, he used to talk about sensing the market, and it's very much part still of what we do. So we're continuously trying to sense the market, and we do that by we've got about 20,000 people globally, and many of those are in local markets, in one of our 60 innovation centres in the regions, close to consumers, where we can understand what's happening in terms of consumer preference changes, where is the consumer going, what are the preferences, and then how do we work with our customers, which are all the major food companies, to position for that. So that would keep us alert.
Yeah, well, I had a former student, I don't know whether she's in the room or not, but she said she might come. And she used to work for Kerry and was very happy there. Really, a lot of people go to Kerry, they don't like it because the culture is so strong. She loved it there. And I said to her, what was the worst thing about working there? She said, the worst thing is your flight's delayed by 4 hours. And then Jerry Bean, and some of you might know Jerry, I think he's not a legend of Irish business. Jerry Bean would show up and he's on your flight. And I said, but Jerry's a real nice guy. He said, yeah, but he knows everything about your account. And he expects you to know everything about it as well. Yeah. So there's something happens in Kerry where Jerry's like the absolute top of the tree.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And you have this account manager who maybe he's coming back from a serious account. Jerry knows who's on our account, what their sales were last year, what they've stopped buying from us. How do you get that?
Well, I think that sort of is it curiosity or just market understanding or really caring about where your customers are. Building those relationships, you know, just having that level of passion for what you do, that you're continuously, you know, you never go anywhere on holidays without going in and seeing what's on the labels and wherever you are. Yeah, you never go into a customer without really understanding, you know, what keeps them awake at night. Yeah. And so I think in part it's that, you know, that always on, let's say, curiosity and just interest and I suppose, you know, customer obsession. But yeah, there's still a lot of people like that.
There's a lot of people like that in Kerry. We had this idea in marketing, if you were here a while ago, we used to talk about it, was pre-your day, post your days. It was called market orientation. And what the idea, and I actually was talking yesterday to the guy who invented the concept. And it was based on 3 ideas, and he said, you have this when you do 3 things. One is when you reward and recognise people for acting like Jerry does. And indeed, Margaret is our colleague. Yeah. Jerry and Margaret, they can sit and have a conversation about the customer. You recognise that they do that and you celebrate it. The second thing is that you actively share that information. So our old friend Pierce Lyons, if he was at this panel today, he would come down and talk to the 4 of you. Pierce is the founder of Alltech. He'd write down everything, not just a few things, he said everything that you said, and then he would send an email to everybody on his network and say, this is what I learned today at the UCD Impact Makers Summit. And it'd go in a black book that would line which are still in his office. Yeah. But he'd phone you like 3 weeks later and said, I met Fergal Leamy at UCD and I wrote down that did you talk to him about that? And if you hadn't, you're in big trouble about it. But the third and most important thing is informal exchange. It's like actually, you know, did you hear what was going on with such and such? Yeah. Did you hear like that her husband was doing this and now the wife is doing that and they're now doing business with them and they just bought that, and it's the informal exchange which I thought was always the strongest part of the Kerry culture and that. Fergal, last but only because I talked to you last. I think we were going to talk about supply chains, but now you might want to talk about something else, but it's up to you.
It's interesting listening to the others. I mean, we've covered consumer changes, energy revolution, AI, and that's all that's going on at the moment, never mind geopolitical stuff. You know, like, the thing that's on my mind and thinking about this is just the pace of change, and maybe just in relation to supply chain. If I think about it, like I joined Glendimplex Group in 2019 and I stepped down as CEO a few months ago. And in that 6-year period, you know, we were just coming out of sort of Brexit and the ramifications of that. We then went into COVID. We then went into Ukraine. We had the Houthi rebels, if you remember them, and the Red Sea disruption. We had supply chain disruptions. We have energy disruptions. We now have the Iran crisis. The sheer level of geopolitical tensions in the world and the impact it has on companies, and particularly in the guise of growth, is really interesting. And I think your question is quite interesting, Damien, around, you know, supply chain and growth. Like 10 years ago, you would have looked at those and said, what's supply chain got to do with growth? I mean, we're sitting here, shouldn't we be talking about markets, business development? Should we be talking about, you know, new technologies? But it is actually, there's real cleverness in that, because supply chain is going to be both the piece that maintains your current business, but also there are growth opportunities. And what I mean by that is, like, today, supply chains and how we think about them are very, very different. 10 years ago, it was all about optimization, lean, efficiency. And, you know, when I was in Theatre Ellen, and I do remember you now.
No, you don't have to be nice to me.
You actually had I had flashbacks there.
I still think
I think I've just blocked it out, to be honest.
No, that's okay. I'll accept that.
But it was all about sort of the Toyota model, etc. And, even up until 2019, I mean, the people in Glendimplex who were in supply chain were not the heroes of the business. They were somewhere in the bowels of the organization. Whereas today, they absolutely are. And I think it's because we've got to think about supply chains differently, and it's all about resilience and not lowest cost. And somebody said to me the other day, it's because they know my view on manufacturing in France. They said, "Do you know that French manufacturing is undergoing a renaissance?" That's just a terrible idea. But the reason it is because people need to look at supply chains differently, and there is a premium for having local supply chains and local manufacturing, despite having to deal with France, over having the long supply chains. And I think if you look about the next 6-10 years, pace of change we've seen over the last 6 years, I think is going to accelerate across energy, across consumer preferences, across AI and geopolitics. So what do we do? I think.
Could you say why it's going to accelerate first?
Well, I think technology is driving a pace of change and comprehension, and the one impact I see of AI is we're just having to think quicker in terms of making decisions. And so the pace at which things are coming at us is so much faster. It's, the chain reaction is so much quicker that things are changing an awful lot faster. And we're seeing it in even politics with the Truth Social blast sort of beginning to shift. Now, people write that off as Trump, but it's actually not. There's lots of things around the world, and leaders around the world are now communicating in that way. And so what would have taken years ago, 10 years ago, for a Department of Finance or somebody else to go through the system of communication or making a change, it's happening much quicker. So I think that's going to accelerate. And I think it's up to everyone, to begin to think about that. Now, the great thing about AI is, you asked Mary the question, what should you do differently? One of the key things is stop looking backwards as much. And I think AI allows us to do that. It allows us to spend an awful lot less time that you and I are spending looking backwards and reviewing what went wrong or what you could have learned. Because AI will be able to do that in nanoseconds. And spend an awful lot more of your day looking forward. And what do I mean by that? It's just thinking through the scenarios across a broad spectrum. And I think that's what's going to become crucial in the new world and new talent, as how you think about the future like that. And just give you a few concrete examples on supply chain. At Glendimplex, we were doing an awful lot of scenario planning in terms of what happens if there's an incursion in Taiwan with China. We're an organization with 64 locations across the globe, and we had a huge amount of goods being transited there. So what's our scenario planning? How do we gameplay that? A business I chair at the moment, Oak Energy, 90%, 95% of all our panels come from China. All our batteries come from China. What do we do if that happens? And how can we get ahead of that by having alternative supply today, but also just potentially taking some strange decisions? Do we build a warehouse here in Europe to stock this so that actually, when this does happen, that's an opportunity? And so we begin to scenario play this an awful lot more. And I think one of the things that as leaders and as people in businesses, you've got to get really comfortable in spending 95% of your time thinking about the future. Whereas traditionally in Ireland and across the world, we would have spent probably at least 60-70% of our time thinking about the past.
I like to pause sometimes for dramatic effect, Just a pause for dramatic effect. I don't even know Ian Bremmer. He's a geopolitical guy. I think he's fantastic. I don't know what his politics are. I just think he's a great analyst. And I listened to a podcast with him. You might have heard it was about the AI, and somebody sent it to me. I don't know. It's super. If anyone wants it, I'm happy to send it to them. And what he's saying at the moment is, because I'm fascinated by what Fergal just said about the acceleration. He said, in the past, we've had G2 or a G1 world, and now we have a G0 world. So G1 and G2 was America and the Soviet Union. They both wanted to rule the world, and they kind of kept things in check to make sure they were always in charge. And then the Soviets fell away, and then it was G1. And the Americans are the Americans, as de Gaulle would say, the Americans are the Americans. But they generally kind of do the right thing. But now, they don't want to be G anything. So we're actually G0. They don't want to be in charge anymore. It's not that they want to be the imperial power. They don't want to be in charge at all. They want to play no role in Europe unless we impose on them. And they have no intention whatsoever of controlling the tech firms that impact so heavily on all of our lives, the firms that we're talking about in terms of this technology, because it doesn't impact as they see it on American democracy or interests, and tech firms can do whatever they want. And Bremer's final thing then is that those firms are now techno-states. and we should regard them as techno-states. It's a terrific podcast. I'd be happy to share it with any of you. But I think this is part of this acceleration. There's nobody saying, hold on 1 second here, guys. We don't actually, that's not how things work around here. We have this, what is it they call them, the international order? Right? There's nobody in charge of the international order anymore. And I think that's a very interesting way to kind of think through these scenarios. I really like these comments, you know. Anybody want to add anything to the list? We've got, you know, AI is an opportunity and a threat. We've got supply chains, which I really love supply chains. Such a challenging area. We've got energy, which is new to me, and then the customer. Just say what your name is, what class you were in, and if you want to, what year you were here.
My name is Evan Real. I graduated last year, and I have a question basically regarding investors. Do you think investors are kind of pushing companies to grow too fast while sacrificing their longevity and the product quality? I just wondering about that. Do you think investors might just slow down and how rapidly we can grow?
I'm saying, take the money while it's there, baby. But maybe more experienced people would have a different view. Mary, you're a finance person. What do you think?
Okay, a couple of comments. I think this was one of your remarks at the outset, Damien, around you know, cost bases and overheads having increased too much post-COVID, etc. And I think that's absolutely a challenge right across sectors. You know, so if you think about profitability and sustainable profitability as opposed to growth at any cost, I think that those fundamentals in terms of prudent growth at a sustainable cost base are more important now than ever, or as important as ever. The basic fundamentals haven't changed in terms of. But I think maybe your question is also brings me to, you know, maybe, you know, the public markets more so than private ownership, and I think that they're very distinct worlds. So the company Cofred that I sit on the board of and have been on the board of for the last couple of years, this is the 6th and 7th generation of a family enterprise. So it's very much absolutely focused on the bottom line in terms of value creation, but sustainably and over the long term, and that ability to take a long-term perspective, because there's the weight of, you know, leaving the business in a better shape for the next generation and generations to follow, I think leads to a very strong aspect in terms of decision making. But at the same time, you know, the current you know, profitability and value creation is a very important factor. Similarly, you know, with the private equity lens, you know, as I mentioned, there's a large private equity business within that portfolio, and that's very focused on the 5 to 7 year cycle, you know, in terms of taking a business, really focusing again on the fundamentals as to how to grow and shape that business. And the fundamentals are the same as they ever were in terms of cost base, digitalization, transformation, the use of AI, you know, the key fundamentals in terms of sustainable levels of growth over a period of time. Also, you know, obviously competitive advantage and market share and all of that. But then, you know, if you contrast that with, you know, the quarterly cycle in terms of earnings calls, it certainly is not suitable for all industries and for all businesses, and can drive very, very, very short-term behaviours. But there are very few players whom can be successful in the short term without having an eye on the long term. So even in the public sector, there has to be an ability to marry the two.
Rita McGrath, she's a good friend of ours here. She's here in Dublin regularly enough. Some of you might have seen her last time she was here. Her view is the same kind of idea, but maybe slightly more academic, which is at certain times in the economic cycle for certain industries, it would be much better to be a private company. At other times, it would be much better to be a public company. The problem is you can't. Well, I guess the whole point of private equity is that you can. But you know, right now it sort of feels like it might be better to be a private company if you could access some capital, because it's time for long-term thinking. Stephen, are you making a political statement or a question? Yeah.
I guess the question question, and actually, you all have had such amazing things. I don't know who this is even aimed at, but I'm wondering.
You better pick somebody, seeing as you know the whole
I think it's probably more Mary. It's around how long, in terms of getting the energy security infrastructure reconfigured, particularly in Europe. How many years are we looking at, do you think, to maybe rebalance that? And certainly in my business with exotic fruits and that, we're going to get slammed now with, energy costs, fertilizers, and, and maybe for the panel in general, are we going to just see a complete reconfiguration of global security on these things? And
a proper engagement with nuclear, right?
Yeah, and is growth actually going to mean just sales growth, and we're all going to have to sacrifice profitability and pay quite a bit more in the short to medium term? But I'm just wondering more on the time frame and just what your thoughts are around
Well, I
that.
let Fergal answer that because he's shaking his head, so I like a bit of disagreement.
You don't want to sacrifice profitability. I think it comes back to the premise of this question here around cost and growth. It really irritates me when people talk about cost and they look down and go, we're going to cut costs. Because I think you have to think about it differently. Every euro that you're spending on bottled water is a euro you're not investing in AI. It's a euro you're not investing in growth channels, marketing. And too often, people don't think about it as portfolio allocation like that. And so back to your question around, are we going to have to think about profit margins differently? I don't think so. I think we're just going to have to get ultra focused on allocation of the dollars. And so again, back to some of the themes here. I see one of the greatest benefits of AI freeing up an awful lot of, shall we say, unhealthy cost in the system and refocusing on some extraordinary growth opportunities and on resilience in a geopolitical world that you'll need to. So it's going to cost more to manufacture in France. It's going to cost more for that sort of thing. And also invest in your own energy security in the future. So I think I don't believe we should be accepting of lower profit margins. I think the winners will be those who deal with their legacy issues, take the tough decisions, and reallocate that capital towards growth.
Just to be clear, we don't normally give out bottled water here. It's only for visitors. So I've never seen this water before, just to be clear on that. If there's any journalists here, don't be writing it in the Cantillon page.
But just to build on that, you can use AI on cost. So in our business, what we've done is, so aging whiskey is a century-old tradition, and Diageo has a huge Scotch portfolio, all in oak barrels. And what we've done is we've built an AI that looks at what's called angel share. So every year, if you have a cask in a warehouse, a bit of it evaporates into the atmosphere, and that's called angel share. And so we have now built a machine learning and AI to help manage all of our mature aging cask warehousing. Really successful projects being generated lots of efficiency, reduced costs, and it basically is a QR code on every single barrel. And that scans it, so we know exactly where it is in the warehouse, and we can move it around to different locations based on the conditions in every warehouse, because every warehouse is unique depending on whereabouts it is. And that's something we're scaling across all of our distilling business globally. But then that frees up cash flow to put back into more AI or another project, or
whose
so
idea was that?
On that. That was the supply team. Yeah, the supply team.
We don't have that much time left, and I wanted to start, Catherine, with you to tell us a little bit about Kerry's transformation towards the creation of these new growth platforms. Kerry has shocked me a few times. Edmund has shocked me a few times with the audacity of the things that he has done, which I don't think he gets enough credit for. Mm-hmm. But the sale of the Sweden cereal business, I've known Kerry for 25 years. That's what everybody loved that business. That was not quite the business that made Kerry, but it was kind of the business that made a lot of people in Kerry's career. I know how much they loved it, and you sold it.
Yeah.
And you sold it. I mean, I'll be flipping for a second to buy a non-smoke flavoring for barbecue crisps or some. I mean, I may be flipping when I say that, but that's one of your products, right? I don't know who you sell it to.
We're the number
one. That's kind of the point, right?
Natural smoke.
Yeah, it's because smoke gives you cancer, and so you have something that gives you the same flavor.
Yeah.
So we talk about creating these new growth platforms. It's really easy in these nice rooms to say that, but that must have been a really hard thing to identify, to execute, and then even when you get the money, it's like getting your confirmation money, you know. All the people who love you give you money, but then you got to decide what to spend it on without wasting the affection almost.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a Catholic guilt thing on my part, but you get the
probably,
thing. Yeah. But what do you spend the money on? I mean, it's like, how do you invest this wisely if you're the leadership team in Kerry and you're saying, shit, what are we going to do now?
Yeah, look, I think
the creation of these platforms.
So I think I agree. Edmund has made extraordinary changes in the business over the last 8 to 10 years, and you know, we're certainly building tremendous growth, pockets of growth. We've identified pockets of growth right across the world, and that's where we're investing. So essentially, in our case, and I saw it firsthand, you know, where he really focused and worked with them firsthand, where he really focused on like what it is we're trying to achieve, where is, you know, what is our vision, where are we going, and then to be ruthlessly and relentlessly focused on that, and make the strategic choices that, you know, enable that flexibility to free up the capital to invest in those areas where we could see that consumer going, which right now, you know, we've made a lot of investments in the whole area of proactive health and natural supplements, and 4 out of 5 people here probably had a supplement today. The world over, that's the case, and the chances are that you know 3 out of 4 of those, you know, contain one of our ingredients, and that's where we've been investing in the area of biotechnology, precision fermentation, and these areas that we believe are going to drive a sustainable nutrition future, which is where our vision lies. So there's a lot about, you know, being really clear on your vision and bringing the team along with you, so that when you divest the dairy business, which is such a core and I would say emotive, you know, connected emotionally connected part of the organisation, so that everybody understands both the part of the business that's being divested and the part of the business that's moving forward. Without that, or without the sweet and cereal business, you know, 1,000 people went to work with Urca, is the company who acquired that business.
1,000 Kerry people.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So there's a huge amount of, because obviously we want them to be successful also into the future. So it's about leadership. Yeah. I think it's about values, and I mean, you know, and you talk about values, but one of our core values from the very beginning, it's part of our DNA, is what Dennis Brosnan called bravery, what we call courage, which is actually having the strength to make really clear decisions that are going to be hard, and then to contextualize those decisions and communicate and over-communicate those decisions, and make sure you're bringing people along with you to make such transformational changes. And they've both been very successful. And not only that, we are a stronger organisation, because that wasn't going to be our core into the future, and we knew that. So where we are focused our energies and efforts and capital now is investing in these areas, new technology platforms, and also moving even within categories, you know, where maybe a category is not really growing, but there are immense pockets of growth within that category. So being able to very quickly assign, you know, the resources, the people, etc., to ensure you're, you know, creating value and capturing value. I guess the customer centricity,
which everybody wonders why a business-to-business customer company is so customer-centric, helps in that. The sense of people are coming back from customers and saying they want this and they want that, we don't have it, we got to get it, because that's the kind of thing to do.
Yes. And yes, not just in terms of the consumer preference, but also in supply chain resiliency. You know, for example, in the, you know, we have about 800 people in the Middle East through Dubai, Oman, and Saudi Arabia. So we're actually building deeper, better customer partnerships, because we are, you know, there. We have the, you know, access to raw materials, natural raw materials, etc. So we're creating customer opportunities, even though it's a difficult environment, because that long-term partnership and relationship and trust, which of course brands are built on trust, is key to.
And those companies need those opportunities right now, because they're the ones who are in trouble, right?
So that's.
We're never allowed to mention Kerry customers when we have a Kerry person in the room, but you can imagine who they might be, right? Yeah. Fergal, when I asked Claude for a profile of the 4 of you, just, you know, for part of my daily routine, and they described what you did in Quilcha and Glen Timpex, like the guy Richard Gere in Pretty Woman.
Not sure I like where this is going.
It sounded really kind of poetic, you know, costs and did this and did that. And when I spoke to you about it, it didn't sound like that at all. It sounded like a much more thoughtful, I mean, I think we use the word playbook, but that almost implies you can just repeat the same thing. I mean, of course, that's not what you can do either. Could you tell us how you built these platforms in Quailshire? I think is a great story, but Glenn, I'll leave it up to you to which you want to focus on, or both, as you see fit.
Yeah, so
Damien,
I think, listen, it's not unfair to call it a playbook, because truthfully, I've worked in many different industries, and the truth is, whilst all businesses are different and all industries are different, there are so many similarities that you can apply. And I guess I will focus on the Quailshire example as one. Part of when you sort of see what actually I think is an extraordinary asset, which is the Quailshire estate and the Quailshire business, and you sort of look at it, and you do look at it coldly and dispassionately, and you work with your team there to sort of figure out, okay, unencumbered, if you do the right thing for this business, what would you do? And I was very fortunate to have a fabulous chair, John Maloney, who was former CEO of Columbia, and the board to give us the sort of wherewithal to have a blank canvas and say, okay, what would you do? And forget about politics, forget about shareholders, forget about everything else. What's the unencumbered view? And it's a really refreshing stage. And so whenever I go into an organization, it's exactly what I do day one, which is blank piece of paper, people who know the business best, because I don't, and figure out what do you do? And what comes out of that before you realize is, and it's getting back to any asset, it's understanding your real areas of opportunity and understanding, more importantly, things that are getting in the way. And it's no different, I'm sure, when a manager goes into a football team or a sports team and just understands what's your purpose, where do you want to go, what do you want to achieve, and what are the assets that need me to get there, and what may be holding me back. And so, again, in Quailshire, I use this example, like we were into everything. Like it was a great organization, fabulous people, but we were all over the place. We had lots of different businesses. We had a telecoms business, we had a children's care business, we had a MDF business, we had businesses in Brussels. We had lots of businesses, and all of them were actually really good ideas. But it was trying to get real focus on what is it we want to try and do. And there were three things. One was we wanted to be a renewable energy developer. We didn't want to own the assets, even though that was the easy thing to do, because we weren't very good at that. And Mary's business is much better at doing that than we would be. We had an asset which was the forest piece, which was a huge growth opportunity, but we always saw it as a burden. And thirdly, we had opportunities in the MDF market for real innovation. Everything else was secondary and wasn't going to change it. So we went about divesting and reallocating that capital in the areas we could win. So we sold off the telecoms business, we sold off our renewable energy assets, and that allowed us to grow our core forestry business, grow our development business in sites for renewable energy, and grow our other three businesses. And so if you look at Quailshire today, it's a much different organization in terms of where it's focused, but it has clearer purpose. And it's as simple as that, really, in terms of, and it is a playbook. And the advantage you have, sometimes you have a massive disadvantage going into an organization not knowing it and not knowing what you're doing. But the real advantage is it forces you to listen. It forces you to understand and to rely on what people around you are saying and listen to their expertise, but also to give you a fresh perspective on things. And that's just a simple playbook.
Fergal is ex-McKinsey, but he won't mind me saying that I think if you wanted to read something about this, because sometimes when people go back to the academy, they like to read a book after they leave. I would read the Prof from the Court books by Chris Zook. Don't buy the books. The books are terrible, but the ideas are fantastic. And on the Bain website, they give away so much stuff for free that you can actually, this idea of what exactly is the core of what we do, how do I strip that out a little bit?
And David, just one of the most important pieces is to approach it with a common purpose of what you want to achieve and where you're going. Because back to my earlier comment about cost cutting as well, like people always get sort of very defensive about cost cutting, or they get very defensive about divesting an asset, back to the Kerry example there. But if people understand why, and it's for the greater purpose of what you're trying to do, everyone gets behind it. The only issue you ever have is if you divest something or you cut costs and you don't explain it to people, and they don't buy into why you're doing it.
In the Kerry example, there's an emotion, though, when you're sending 1,000 people to another company, which is not an Irish company, because those 1,000 people are your brothers and sisters, your relatives, your neighbours. You do the same thing. I mean, these are in local communities around Ireland, and we're sending them off now to work for somebody else. So it's got to be
I sold Morphy Richards to the Chinese. It was massively emotional.
I don't know if there's any Chinese friends in the room. I spent a lot of time in China, and I'm very long on China. I really admire what they do there. But if I was to ask my students here, do you want to work for an American company? Yeah. You want to work for a British company? No problem. The French? No problem. You want to work for a Chinese company? No way. And the reason is because they work so hard. It's not for any other reason than that. So I think the emotion of that decision is enormous as well to think about. Mary, when we talked a little bit about, when I talked to Fergal yesterday, we were talking about what you would invest in, and he said shovels and concrete, I think, was it? Well,
picks and shovels.
Picks and shovels. Picks and shovels. And he said, I would not invest in software.
I don't understand it.
But you're heavily invested in software, and you're kind of long on it, right? If I remember our conversation correctly, it was not... Maybe you understand it a bit better than I do. Anyway, I won't speak for Fergal. But you're kind of long on software, right?
Yeah. So within our private equity business, there's, it's about 50% invested in software companies in the US and also in Europe. So as a board, we've been spending obviously a lot of time over quite a number of months in terms of the AI resilience and otherwise, what are opportunities, what are threats within the portfolio, and it's really such a fascinating time to have the opportunity to dive deep into many different software companies across many different sectors, and. So first of all, I think that there's, if you're trying to divest a software company in the current market, it's all bets are off. It's extremely difficult. Software valuations are down. They're all the headlines. So it's difficult for exits. But if you're in the mode of having what were already, strong businesses that have been on the AI journey for some time, and then they're shaking out then in terms of where there are growth opportunities and where there are threats. And back to some of the comments made earlier, like the ability to be nimble, to move quickly, and to have AI embedded right within the overall organisation clearly is key. Because, surprisingly, I started with the lens of, we've got a problem here, and actually now I'm far more in the mindset of, we're actually very well positioned and have fantastic growth opportunities because of that technological focus that's been there and is inherent in the DNA of the private equity firm, and also within the companies then that they're invested in. And a couple of reflections that gives me. Could I ask the audience a question?
Sure.
Could we do a show of hands? Who would describe themselves as an AI native? Do we have any in the audience? Any AI natives? So I was exactly like that. I would have said, no, I'm not an AI native. But my challenge to myself and to all of us is that we are the AI natives. And it's like, forgive me now, I've got into a personal anecdote. A number of years ago, I realised my husband didn't know how to use the washing machine. And we've got 3 kids, there's an awful lot of laundry, I was travelling a lot, he's very busy, and I'd be like, what the hell? I come back and there's like these mountains of laundry built up. And anyway, he confessed, he was like, I don't really know how to use the washing machine. And I was like, I wasn't born with any inherent, knowledge that came, when that was, native in me to use the washing machine. So anyway, I would say the same to AI. We, all of us, if you want to contribute to society or to the workforce in any way, shape or form, we are the AI natives, and we have to get on board on that really quickly. And again, what I see across some of these organisations is the senior level sponsorship. It's everyone now that I interact with, if it's a paper that comes for review, or something in an audit committee, or any forum, or meet a colleague, for passing in the corridor for a coffee between meetings, I ask, have you used AI in this? What are you seeing? What are you using? And the level of adoption then, because there's that senior level sponsorship, not from me necessarily, but at the management level, is moving really, really rapidly. It started with everyone's got a ChatGPT license within the organisation. Everyone's got ChatGPT and Claude. It's experimenting, but it was experimenting very quickly and then moving into use cases, test cases, and then it kind of starts to open up just a whole level of innovation. And this is within generally, an ecosystem, as I referred to a few minutes ago, that's, quite long term in terms of its thinking, privately owned, not necessarily typically AI native. So I think we all have to get on board on that really quickly and realise we are the natives and we are we're here, we're now, and we have to get on board.
I'm going to tell one story against myself and join in on this. The last time my wife went away, I not only do I not know how to use the washing machine, but I don't know how to use the dishwasher or to turn on our oven. So I'm sorry, what can I do? But let me tell you something about you. I think your point is a really important point. And we had a AI marketing guy, kind of more Tyrion's kind of vintage, and he said everybody he's hiring now for marketing jobs, he's asked them what they've built. And he said most of them have no idea what I'm talking about. And he said, if they know what I'm talking about, that's a start. And if they build something, I'm hiring them. And what he means is agents. Have they actually built an agent that can do something? It doesn't matter whether it worked or not. Doesn't matter whether it's being used, but it's right to your point.
Agent. Yeah.
Is this crazy, Tiernan?
No. It's certainly it's very easy. So if you have, how many has built an agent already? I'm sure there's a few. Only 2. Wow.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
If they want to go home and build an agent tonight, top 3 tips.
Just give it a go. Honestly, it's not that hard.
No. If they haven't done it, they don't know what to do. How do we get started with this?
Ask Claude.
Yeah, ask the AI to walk you through, literally step by step, how do I build an agent?
What would be the best thing to do?
Yeah, what is the thing that's sucking up most of your time, you or your team's time? So for example, just to give you a personal example again, I met a brilliant UCD graduate, probably did a postgrad in accounting. She prepares board papers for my team to read, and she spends 2.5 days a month looking backwards on 59,000 lines of code in an Excel sheet. And then turning it into a pivot table, and then reading the extract to put it into a PowerPoint. And I was like, that is a waste of your talent. And how can we then set up an agent to help you? Because we don't want anyone in any company doing that, right? It's beyond her. So that's just an example of how can we build an agent on that. Now, what I found is sometimes in sort of more complex ones, you need to have it's not about the technology choice necessarily, it's about the partnership. Can you find a partner that'll help you teach your team how to do this? So you do it once, you can reapply it to another. So it's not necessarily whether it's Claude or OpenAI or Copilot. Sometimes you do need someone to, okay, how do I do it on that just one challenge? And if I do it on that one challenge, I can then bring it to, there's got to be a lot of people in the company who are looking at a lot of Excel sheets, right? How can we bring that learning to the next team, and then scale it that way? Think about what's sucking up your time and just give it a go. Just write, well, how do I build an agent to simplify my diary, to reply, to scan all of the news articles related to my industry and give me a summary every week? Whatever it might be.
Catherine?
Another just really simple one that I oversee the communications team. So they create a tone of voice agent. So, you can create an agent to, reflect the tone of voice of the brand. So instead of, this non-step, where you have all these people editing and making sure and et cetera, you can actually program, which, it seemed like it took them 2 minutes to create it. But the point about leadership endorsement, our CEO took us all to Silicon Valley, and we went into NVIDIA and LinkedIn, and we looked at startups, and that was, that was a clear message. It's like, this is where this starts. We can't, devolve, responsibility for becoming AI natives. This is where we need to start. And even that was an important signal for the organisation. So it wasn't something it was something we spoke about and we shared, and we went back to talk to our teams about what we learned, and that was really, I think really elevated the uptake.
I want you to really feel how important alumni are to us here, and this is not a joke. On the basis of our other colleague, I said, well, how many agents would they have to build for you to hire them? He said 2. So I said, this time next year, everybody who graduates from an MSc from Smurfit School will have built 2 agents. I have no idea how we're going to do that. I have no idea who's going to. I mean, some of our faculty can do it, but I don't know how we teach it, because I don't know. I have no idea what we're going to do. But when somebody walks into our room and says something like that, I think you have to respond to it straight away. And waiting for 2 or 3 years for the systems to be in place is not what we're going to do. We've got like about 4 minutes left, or maybe a little bit longer than that, if you know. But I'm not that. Is anyone going to ask a question? Yeah. Maybe you just wait for the microphone, because we want to record you and put you into an AI machine. And if you say anything interesting, we're going to steal it as our own ideas.
My name is Hava. I'm a 4th-year economics student. So we've been talking about...
How did you get in here?
I'm actually an exchange student from Turkey, but I'll be studying here. I'll be studying in Ireland.
So you just snuck in?
I just registered for this program, yeah. But I'll be doing my master's in law and finance in Trinity this September. So yeah, I'm excited for that. So we've been...
You can only ask this question of Tiernan. He's the only other Trinity graduate in the room.
So yeah, we've been talking about the positive things about AI in terms of cutting costs, etc. But are you concerned on how it's affecting our inherent decision-making capabilities? You know, because we were talking about our like the leaders behind all these supply chain networks, but what about their inherent abilities in terms of, or like what does that look like in the future? Because we are growing up and we are overly using AI. So do you have any concern about that, or you don't find it as a threat?
Is it making us dumber, Tiernan?
Sorry?
Is it making us dumber?
I think there is obviously a risk with that, where you just ask it everything, right? But yeah, I do think there's like a bit of scaremongering around the AI. Oh, this is so dangerous, we can't release it, but yet they release it. Yeah. So there's a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy, and it's like we're beyond regulation. we're too big, almost. I find that narrative a bit challenging. Like, well, because it just doesn't make sense, right? When they say, oh, we can't release Claude or Mythos or all these godlike names that they can't release the latest version of because it's going to hack everything, and yet they do. So I find that positioning a bit strange from a corporate perspective.
If you don't want to be dumb, don't look at TikTok and Instagram all day. Yeah. If you don't want your kids to be dumb, don't give them a screen when you want them to be quiet. Talking to them is actually a really very good idea. A lot of young people today are fantastic. I refuse to have anything bad said about them, because they are the kindest, nicest, most caring, community-driven group I've met in 35 years in this business. There's no question about that. But nobody wants to read anything. Nobody wants to think about anything, and that's because they spent their childhood looking at bloody screens, watching Dora the Explorer or Blue's Clues or whatever cohort you came from. But that's it. Another question. Are you a Trinity graduate? No? Phew. Good luck with your studies anyway. You'll need it.
Patrick Gall is my name. I work for IDA Ireland. Cool. So I think IDA's had a relationship with at least 2 of the panelists there. I was reading the Kerry Way book. I dusted it off there a couple of years ago.
Well done.
And I saw IDA back in the 1970s gave Kerry Group its first grant. So we've a long relationship with
And you
Kerry.
thought it was down to Dennis Brosnan. It was actually down to the IDA.
And with Diageo, I know we helped out Diageo with the land acquisition in Kildare for your new brewery. But the question I have for you all is, if you were advising IDA looking forward, if we're talking about looking forward, what guidance would you give the country in terms of what are the key issues we need to address?
One idea from each of you, because we're running out of time, and I think you should pay for the advice. Mary, energy, we need more energy.
We need to sort out, sorry, I'm like a broken record now, I'm not going to say anything novel. We need to sort out our planning system fast and very quickly, and it's not that complicated. That's my one.
Catherine?
Something that doesn't come up very much, but I'm a believer in, is language skills. I think it's something we've kind of walked away from a bit in the last, I graduated at a time where you studied languages because that's where you would get jobs, and we have become a little complacent in terms of languages. I know it's not popular, but I think when you understand a language, invariably that means you've gone to live in a place and you've got to understand the culture, and you can't understand, I don't think, global markets without living, experiencing, and not just flying in and out, but actually experiencing local cultural idiosyncrasies. And language is something I've seen, less and less people coming through into the system with language skills, and that it's just, that's one of my, beyond the obvious ones that we all complain about, schools and roads and houses. And
you may not like my answer, but I would probably merge IDA with Enterprise Ireland, and I would think about the problem differently to how we've thought about it in the past. I think IDA has done a phenomenal job of attracting international investment into Ireland. I think in the future world it's about thinking about business in the holistic sense and not being that sort of let's come and invest here. It's thinking about Ireland Inc. as a place for enterprise, a place for investing in technology, and a place for just doing business in general.
I think we have 3 great public sector, not semi-states. Semi-states are a different matter, public sector organisation in this country. Borbia, outstanding. The revenue commissioners, outstanding, and IDA are absolutely world-class, outstanding. And I'm going to disagree with you on this one, Fergal, I'm afraid. But that's more fun than agreeing. How are we doing so far? And let's just ask Tiernan as well, because I want to get one thing from him.
Yeah, probably not surprisingly,
Yeah. Tiernan. Of course you're right, I'm wrong, of course.
Probably not surprisingly, I would say AI and technology more at secondary school level and into third level, because that's the change that we're going to have to live through as workers, individuals, private life, and as a society. It's going to be the fundamental change. So how do we, I don't know what the answer is, but it's worth at least looking at from an education perspective.
In the Ian Bremmer video that I mentioned, he talks about techno-states, those big tech firms. He said the need for countries to have relationships with them to understand who they were. And I thought of your outstanding organisation. I thought there is not an organisation outside the United States in the whole world that understands the tech sector better than the IDA does. So I think we're in great shape, thanks to you. Is there one last question, or will we head off back to hear some other talk? There were so many other things on my list to talk about, but we never have enough time. But it's tremendous being in a room learning from you again, and it's really tremendous to have 4 of our very distinguished alums to be here and to learn from them. So please join me in thanking Catherine, Mary, Fergal and Tiernan. And Grace, we're going back to C201 now. Yeah, back to C201.